Good morning. Welcome to the Point. This morning we're happy to have with us the chairman of the Michigan Democratic Party, Brandon Dillon. Mr. Chairman, first of all, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Congratulations on a successful election cycle. Before we start our conversation about that, I want to remind our viewers of something. 2 years ago, almost to the day and in the same fashion, I reached out to you and said, hey, we just came through this big election cycle. Can you come in and talk to me about it? You, without hesitation, said, yes, I'll come in and talk to you about it. And reminding everybody that 2016 at this time was pretty miserable for a lot of Democrats. A lot of things didn't transpire that you thought that they would. You answered the bell then. I appreciated it then, and I appreciate you coming in today when I know you feel considerably better about the outcome.
It was easier to answer the bell this year.
2018. But I think it's important for people to remember that you have been willing to come in and talk on occasions when things didn't go the way you hoped they would or even anticipated they would, but we don't have to talk about that today. So let's talk about what did happen in this election cycle. I haven't been able to research it completely, but certainly in the time that I have been covering politics in the state, I have never seen all of the constitutional offices flip. The governor, attorney general, secretary of state all went from Republican to Democrat in one cycle. I'm not saying it hasn't happened, I just can't see where it has. That in itself is an accomplishment, I would think you would consider.
As far as I know, it hasn't happened before. I know it's never happened, at least in the 20th or 21st century, to all flip Republican to Democratic. So it was a pretty historic night in that regard. But there was some other great things that happened for us. We were able to win all the education boards at Michigan State, University of Michigan, Wayne State, and the Board of Ed, picked up 2 congressional seats, won a bunch of down ballot races too as well, not just for the state legislature, 5 in the House, 5 in the Senate, but county commission races, which we had tried to focus on since the last election. But politics is not static. That's why I came on 2 years ago, because sometimes you win and sometimes you lose, but you always got to be pushing forward if you're looking to make change. And I think we did a good job, but now the election starts again, unfortunately, for 2020, and we've got a lot more work to do.
Well, and it becomes more complicated in some ways because it's difficult when you're in the minority. You served in the House of Representatives, and you saw what that's like. And you've been, as Democrats, in the minority for the last 8 years, and that's not a fun place to be.
No.
But it takes a lot of responsibility off of your shoulders from the standpoint of governance. When you are in control, in addition to running for 2020 and 2022, you also have to govern. So that's part of the added traction, if you will, in this next cycle.
Well, absolutely. Fortunately, I think we got really serious people who understand that an election is one thing, but governing is why you run. Whether it's Gretchen Whitmer, Dana Nessel, Jocelyn Benson, these are really professionally sophisticated people who I think understand that in an era of divided government, you have to look for areas that you can achieve things. And as I know Gretchen Whitmer said this a lot, it's just about getting things done and being pragmatic. People, we have a tendency to overinterpret these election results, especially wave elections, that somehow people just fell in love with Democrats or they fell in love with Republicans in 2010. It's a lot more complicated. There's a lot of people who are just looking for things to get better for them. And I think that will be the measure of success for any Democratic administration is, have we made people's lives marginally or a little bit better, and hopefully a lot better over the course of their terms.
One of the things that will be contentious, I suspect, is spending priorities and how quickly those spending priorities get taken care of. In talking with the current Senate Majority Leader, Arlen Meekhoff, who will have nothing to do with that because he's term limited out, he had some interesting things to say from this standpoint. For the first time in 16 years, there'll be a governor who has actually served in the legislature, not only in the Senate as the leader of Democrats, but also over in the House. So Governor-elect Whitmer has seen what it's like in the legislative body, and she also knows what it's like to have somebody sitting across the street in the Romney building trying to dictate to the legislature. And I can tell you as an observer, they don't like that much.
No, they don't. I was there. They don't.
So she does bring a different perspective when it comes to governance, at least working inside of Lansing.
Look, I think it's really important. The last 2 governors we've had, one Democratic, one Republican, obviously very accomplished people and were able to get elected to the executive office, but had zero legislative experience. I think in an era especially where, we're so polarized, where people are, swinging from one side to the other, the vast majority of people want some moderation. They want things to get done, and Gretchen's experience in the legislature, I think, will serve her well. And she's shown an ability to reach across the aisle without compromising her principles. I'm hopeful that the Republicans who ran on their slogan this year, results not resistance, will take that to heart and look for areas of common ground. I know Senator Shirkey, who's the Senate Majority Leader, a very strong conservative, but somebody who's shown a willingness to step out from that to actually accomplish some big things. So I'm optimistic that we're going to see some things get done, but it is not going to be easy.
I believe Senator Shirkey, if my memory serves, actually ended up going along with Medicare.
He was the lead.
Expansion.
He was the one that brokered that deal on the Republican side in the House. And obviously, this is somebody who has very strong conservative credentials. It's somebody who I've disagreed with vehemently on many issues. But I do think there's a level of seriousness there where he understands, and hopefully House leadership as well, that, look, we've got big problems, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's water, whether it's making sure that we continue to have economic development, that this is going to take people getting together, and we'll all get rewarded around the state if we actually can produce some results for people that actually make an impact in their lives.
When you think about infrastructure, that's a conversation that you and I have had for the better part of 20 years on one level or another. It's gotten considerably more pointed over the past 6 or 7 years, but this governor-elect put a lot into the promise of fixing the roads. And one doesn't have to go back too far to remember people promising certain things that would happen, and when they didn't happen in the time frame that either the opposition framed them as or even the public framed them, those kind of things, those really big, bold, stark promises, if not fulfilled in a timely manner, can be difficult. So what do you think, from your perspective as a party chief, but also somebody who's been in the legislature, that this new governor is going to have to do to fix the roads?
Well, look, I think she's going to do what she said she would do on the campaign trail. She's going to present a budget. She's going to ask the legislature to present or to find the revenue to make sure that we have an infrastructure plan that actually fixes the road, but also fixes that underground infrastructure as well, too. And if not, I think she will negotiate hard. I think she's willing. She understands that compromise is going to be important, but I think she's going to put out a bold plan. And if it's unsuccessful in the legislature, I think she's been very clear she'll take it straight to the people. And I think, given what we saw over the last 2 years, where that infrastructure issue just continued to be at the top of people's minds, that she'll have a receptive audience in the public, and hopefully we can just get it done in the legislature and do what's right for everybody and get these roads fixed.
If you take something like that to the voters, and we saw the Republicans very unsuccessfully take this more than just infrastructure package. There were a lot of things connected to that. And part of that was to get Democrats in the legislature to go along with it, and you ended up with this semi-Christmas tree thing. If you take something like that to the voters, how sure do you have to be that you can sell it before you put it out?
Well, I think ideally this should get done in the legislature. People get elected. I don't think any Democrat or any Republican had anybody tell them in their district that the roads are just fine and we shouldn't do anything about it.
No, but I'll bet you that they had people that said, don't raise my taxes.
I was just going to say that. The difference is there's always a debate about how we pay for that. But I do think this has reached a point where people are not going to get punished if they're willing to step out and do some things that they might not have campaigned on, might not be necessarily always comfortable with. And if that doesn't happen, then I think it'll be the responsibility of the governor and others who have an interest in this to put a plan together that actually is laser focused on fixing the roads and can't be bogged down by people saying it is just a Christmas tree, as you said, for other special interests.
We've got a lot more to talk about, and we're going to do that. And when we do, we're going to talk a little bit about the legislature. It's got a new look. We'll talk about that to the point. Welcome back to the Point. Our guest this morning is the chairman of the Michigan Democratic Party, Brandon Dillon. And Mr. Chairman, when you sit here and you look back at this election cycle, I know how hard both sides worked. as a chairman, you've got to raise a lot of money, you've got to keep a lot of people happy, you've got to figure out what's going on the ground. Polling is more difficult, I would guess, in this environment. It's about turnout. And it's always been about turnout. And 2 years ago, and 2 years prior to that, you and I sat at this desk and you talked about that very thing. You focused over the past 2 years about making sure that people went to the polls. And you've had some help. Obviously, there's been a lot of energy in the Democratic Party. There have been things that have continued to happen with this administration, by administration I mean in Washington, that have helped keep Democrats energized. But that's not enough. You still had to make sure that you turned them out on Election Day. So on Election Day, when you saw 53 or 54% turning out in Grand Rapids, which is a good base for Democrats to begin with, what was your thought?
When we saw the turnout in places, and we always track different areas to kind of see, we saw an increase in Republican turnout in certain areas, but we saw a bigger increase in Democratic turnout in areas that we were expecting to do well in. So I said this a few months ago. I thought Gretchen would win Kent County based on the results in the primary and what I thought was going to happen in Grand Rapids and some of the other suburbs. But there was an energy that I think, as you said, was fueled by resistance to Donald Trump or a desire to make things differently, but it was also people just on the ground really talking to their neighbors about the importance of getting out and voting in a state election. So we saw Kalamazoo County, which is becoming an increasingly Democratic area, turn out strong. We felt we had a really good shot statewide, and it portended well for some of the legislative seats that we were looking to pick up. So look, anytime you get 4.2 million voters to come out in a midterm election, that's good. And having voters on both sides be willing to come out and engage, I think it gives more legitimacy to the folks that are in office to be able to say, this wasn't an election where just a sliver of the population came out. We at least got over half of the people to come out and vote.
You, on a legislative basis, in both the State House and the State Senate, you needed to pick up 9. You picked up 5, both places. But that does change the dynamics, and it gives you representation in places you haven't had it for a very long time. I think you're going to go back to the 80s before you had a Democrat representing Kent County. Winnie Brinks is now the senator-elect for the 29th district. Those kind of things make a difference going forward because she's not there for just 2 years, it's a 4-year term. And so as that goes forward, gives you a place to have some input in the legislative bodies. However, you're still in the minority there. And so it's going to create divided government, which we have seen before. Sometimes it works, and sometimes it's really hard to get stuff.
That's right. Well, obviously Winnie Brinks was somebody that I was very interested in seeing winning that election. She's my state senator. I think she's going to do a great job. But we also won a seat in Kalamazoo County, beating an incumbent who was, somebody who was a very strong challenger, or somebody who was a very strong candidate. But we're seeing kind of a realignment here in where the party's strength is. I mean, 20 years ago, we weren't winning in Kalamazoo and Kent County. We were winning in Macomb and some other places, and you're starting to see some of the stuff exacerbated by Trump, where you're seeing different coalitions come together. So I think you're going to see continued strength and growth for Democrats in areas like Kent County, Kalamazoo County, even places like Grand Traverse County. But we're going to have challenges in other places. But I do think, even though we didn't pick up the majority, we are going to have a very strong influence on policy. There's a lot of Republicans who barely won their election. I think they're going to, if they're smart, they're going to want to moderate their positions on some issues to make sure that they can come back in 2020 or at least compete. And I think the responsibility for everybody is to actually start looking at what these results are. Despite these gerrymandered districts, there's a desire for change, and voters, I think, sent a strong message on election night that they want to see things done differently, and hopefully Democrats and Republicans in the legislature can get together and make some of those changes.
All right, let me play devil's advocate for a minute. You just said you'd like to see, or you think they should, Republicans should moderate. Democrats, on the other hand, seem to be doing what Republicans have been doing for a while, and when it comes to primaries, they're voting in the extreme. So if I'm a Republican or a Democrat and I'm in the legislature and I'm interested in not having a primary in 2 years or in 4 years, moderation is not the first thing that pops into my mind. So how, or not that it's yours to fix, but how does the system get to a place where it doesn't reward the far edges and you actually get people who can moderate, who can compromise and be reelected.
Well, it's one of the reasons I think it was so important, not just the partisan victories we had this year, but Proposition 2 and Proposition 3 passing, which in terms of moderating behavior, I've argued this for a long time. We've talked about this. You know, these extreme gerrymandered districts, it's not that people are any more partisan who are running for office than they were 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago. It's that the system is set up to reward people to compete in primaries and then not have to worry about a general election. If Prop 2 works as intended, and I think there's a lot of work to be done to iron that out, but at least we can get districts that aren't so extreme to one side or the other, then the center of gravity becomes the general election and appealing to more voters in the middle as opposed to voters on the far left or even on the far right. So I think that's a very strong reform. But look, people want results. I think we're getting to a point in this country and in the state where people are just exhausted by the constant back and forth and the power games. And if we can set an example in Michigan where we can actually make some changes with this divided government, I think that will also set a really strong precedent going forward.
Let's talk a little bit about the U.S. House because as we sit here today, I believe we are now 7-7. Republicans have 7, Democrats have 7. You picked up 2. One was an open seat where a Republican didn't run again. The other was Mike Bishop, former Senate Majority Leader, and he's been there for 4 terms, 3 or 4 terms.
3 or 4 terms, yeah.
And so you picked up those 2, but the state will lose one. Well, no more than one, I wouldn't think. So we'll go down to 13 for the 2022 election. That's going to be a real test too for Prop 2 because you're going to have to draw those districts in such a way that you will have representation, and it gets kind of difficult because of some of the restrictions that you have, particularly when you get in Southeast Michigan. So how big a lift is that going to be? I know there are a lot of people euphoric that this passed.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's going to be easy.
And you and I have talked about this for a long, long time because I think a lot of folks think there has to be a better way. But how, in your mind, is that going to work?
Yeah, look, I would be lying if I told you I knew I was going to work. I do think, look, we have a system that is really bad right now where whatever, we saw this in Maryland, Democrats did it there, in Michigan, Republicans have done it. When you got the power, you use it, and you draw the lines to protect yourselves, and you cut deals with people to save this little area here and put this area over here. Prop 2 is probably not going to be perfect, but it's better. And the measure of progress, I believe, is just making the system better as much as you can every year, every election. And look, I think the proof will be in whatever the maps come out, but at least we won't have people who are totally self-interested drawing those lines and making them so artificial that you lose confidence in the process altogether.
We've got about a minute left, and I want to talk to you about 2 more, well, I'll talk to you about 3 more congressional seats, and those are ones here in the West Michigan area. In the 2nd, in the 3rd, and in the 6th. In the 2nd and the 6th, you had 2 very aggressive candidates who raised and spent a lot of money, certainly relative to what's been spent there in the past. No doubt that helped with turnout. Are the demographics changing enough in those kind of congressional districts that you really feel competitive?
Well, I think in the 6th in particular. I mean, I think if Fred Upton would have not sought re-election, we would have had a really good chance of picking up that seat. Fact of the matter is we had a good candidate, but Fred Upton's been around a long time. He's got a lot of relationships, and he won the seat. But I think you're going to see some serious, that district is going to continue to be competitive. The 2nd and the 3rd, I think depending on how the lines get drawn in 2022, could move in that direction as well.
We are going to have further conversations about how those lines get drawn, and we'll also be talking about upcoming elections. But I want to thank you for coming in and doing this show today. Coming up in our next segment, and I will set it up when we come back, we're going to show you a piece that was done by our promotions department, a pretty remarkable piece that followed me through one of the busiest days of this election cycle when we had our gubernatorial debate. All that's coming up. To the point. Matt Ferguson is one of our promotions producers here at Wood TV, and he's one of the most talented guys that I've ever worked with. On the day that we had our gubernatorial election here in this studio, he started with me a little before 6 o'clock in the morning and ended up with me sometime a little after 11 o'clock that night. He chronicled everything that we did all day. This isn't about me, but it's about an entire team and how we get things done and why we bother to go to the extent that we do. That's how we'll finish our program this morning. To the point.
we have a big debate happening right here tonight. Two of the candidates for governor will be here in our studios.
And the debate happens on the heels of new video surfacing of Bill Schuette from 3 decades ago. It's an outtake from before an on-camera interview where Schuette is seen telling a woman, quote, "I will do anything you want," end quote. The video does go on from there.
Political reporter Rick Albin is at the Wood Radio studio. Rick, how will this video change things for tonight, or will it?
It will not be the focus of this debate because there is far too much more to talk about. The real conversation is about what happens with jobs, what happens with your money, what happens for the state of Michigan going forward. So the focus will still be there. This certainly adds another element to it.
Taking you inside Michigan politics. This is a Decision 2018 update with 24-hour News 8 senior political reporter Rick Albin.
Rick Albin tonight at Wood TV, former Senator Gretchen Whitmer and Attorney General Bill Schuette. Do you have a sense at how contentious this could get this evening?
No, I really don't. It's hard to say, but having something contentious doesn't necessarily expand the knowledge for the voters about what these two candidates would do. How would they be different as governor? And that's the thing that we need to be trying to grasp tonight.
But do you feel you'll have to be more of a police cop with the time tonight? Because I know there's a lot of things you want to get to.
The format is different. I rewrote the format for this one to give the candidates more opportunity to explain their position.
So do you have, is everything produced out now? Because I saw there were some editing notes.
The rules are worded like they cannot be more than 10 feet apart, but it doesn't say how close.
You know what I'm supposed to do for mics? Okay, if you would, because I've got some up here. Let's see how it looks from over here. When we get somebody in the control room, I'd like to pull those boxes up and see what they look like. We will start, obviously, with having the candidates arrive and getting them situated in their holding rooms. At the same time, I'll do a live hit at 5.
From Wood TV, this is 24-hour News 8.
This is a crucial night in the race for governor.
Both candidates are now at our studios preparing for the 7 o'clock debate.
After the debate, we're still doing the Facebook Live, and we'll have the candidates as well as some other just reaction. I'll go ahead and get my IFB on, so whenever you get up there, if we can just get through the first question, I think we'll be all right.
60 up, 61 is a 2-shot.
Hello, test 2, 3.
This is about to start.
Let's get this long-awaited debate underway.
Michigan needs to be a place of growth and opportunity.
I care about getting to the issues that really matter to the people of this state.
This represents the questions that we have received over the past couple of weeks that people want to know about serious issues, about issues that some of you have already brought up.
The real issues for Michigan is about whether we go forward or going back. You didn't do your job. Stay on the 2-shot for a second. Stay on here. They could fight over this.
Well, the Attorney General knows that's nonsense, and he was not in any of the meetings. He professes to know what happened here. The fact of the matter is, I did my job.
Joined now by Rick Albin, you got to moderate this debate. Looking back, do you feel like overall they answered your questions?
So there's always kind of this fight, kind of this pull.
Right.
They want to stay on message. I want to get to the deeper
Specifics.
points. And for me, as a political junkie, this is really something that I look forward to just because I like it. But we do a lot of things. I mean, there's a lot of heavy lifting to do this. The production folks, the sales department, everybody at the station, everybody in the news department, we blow out an hour of commercials. I mean, so we do this because there's a purpose.
Our political reporter Rick Albin moderated tonight's debate. All right, Rick, your initial thoughts.
Here's the thing. This really is a big election. Everything is going to change. And the change will be up to the people watching this, that watch the debate tonight. And that change is going to happen whether you vote or whether you don't vote.